During the last 10 weeks or so of this pandemic, I have often been asked by people in our church when I've called them or been in conversation with them, what can I do? Is there anything I can do to help? And because of social distancing, there are some things that we can't do, but I did think that there is one thing everybody can do. So I wanted to do a lesson this morning called What You Can Do, because everybody can do this. And we come to the end of the lesson, I want to challenge you in a specific way to do what you can do. Romans 12:8 reads, if your gift is to encourage others, be encouraging. Now, if you're at home with me, I want you to read just that line out loud with me as I read it again. If your gift is to encourage others, be encouraging. If it is giving, give generously. If God has given you leadership ability, take that leadership responsibility seriously. And if you have a gift for showing kindness to others, do it gladly. The Bible spells out our need for praise and encouragement toward other people. And even as I say that, I'm reminded of a story that Chuck Swindoll told in his book, Growing Deep in the Christian Life, about a man who was getting ready to make a trip around the world, a voyage in his homemade boat. And without exception, every single person in his life, every single person that knew he was doing this was vocally pessimistic. Everybody was telling him everything that could possibly go wrong. The sun will broil you. You won't have enough food. That little boat that you've made won't be able to withstand the storms that you will face out on the open water. You'll never make it. And just as he was getting ready to launch off, a man standing by who had heard for weeks all of these discouraging words decided to do the opposite. He decided to offer some words of encouragement. And just as he was pulling away from the shore, he went to the edge of the pier and began waving his arms wildly and shouting, "Bon voyage! You're really something. What you're doing is amazing. We're with you. We're proud of you. Good luck, brother. We'll be praying for you." That story is so similar to our lives. In a sense, we are all on a little boat called life, and we're on a long journey, not knowing when it's going to conclude. And as we push out to sea, there are an awful lot of people that are critical or negative, always picking at this or that. And there are very few people who are positive or encouraging. And that's a pretty sad commentary on life, but often it's true for most of us. There are many discouragers in life, but few encouragers. So can I tell you this morning what you can do? For those who keep asking, well, what can I do? I'm stuck at home. I'm quarantined. I'm older. I'm 60 or older, and it's just about all I can do to make one trip every 2 or 3 weeks to the grocery store. What can I do? I'll tell you what you could do. You can get out some stamps and encouragement cards or letters and send them to 1 or 2 people every week. I'll tell you what you can do. You can get your smartphones, those of you who have them, and text words of encouragement and text scriptures to people several times a week. There are several things you can do to use the gift of encouragement. And the Bible tells us to do this. Proverbs 11:25, for instance, says, "The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed." You will find that as you encourage or refresh other people, you yourself will be refreshed. In Romans chapter 16, the first 2 verses we read, where Paul wrote, "I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a deacon of the church in Cenchrea. I ask you to receive her in the Lord in a way worthy of his people, and to give her any help she may need for you. For she has been the benefactor of many people, including me." Other translation says, "For she has encouraged many people, including me." 1 Corinthians 16:18 says, they have been a wonderful encouragement to me as they have been to you. You must show your appreciation to all who serve so well. And of course, we're all familiar with Hebrews 10:24 and 25. Actually, I should say, we're all familiar with Hebrews 10:25. We're less familiar with Hebrews 10:24, which is the context of verse 25, and tells us, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. In other words, let us spur one another, encourage one another toward love and action. Not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. What you can do is encourage, as all of these scriptures are telling us. And what you can do is avoid discouraging. And any of us can do that. Any of us can do that. So let me briefly ask 3 questions this morning to encourage you with what you can do. First of all, encourage whom? When I say I want you to have a ministry of encouragement, and that's something you could do, you first might think, well, whom? Well, begin with your loved ones, your family. Some people are pretty good at praising away from home, but not so good at praising at home. And I never have understood that. I never have understood that, because the place where you make the biggest impact in terms of your encouragement is at home. I have never wanted to be, and don't think I am, one of those people that I come to church with hundreds of people here and hug and shake hands and encourage and say positive things to people, and then go home and don't say those same things to my wife or to my children. In fact, if anything, my goal is to say more words of encouragement and have more hugs at home with my wife and my children and my grandchildren. It's always amazed me that the people with whom we can have the greatest influence, we often are the most discouraging. Praise your kids. Surely they must do something right. Praise your spouse. Be a compliment spreader. Be a joy spreader. Now, it works the opposite way too. You can let go of things that just really aren't that important. Some time ago, somebody told me about a criticism of me, a criticism that sometimes, frankly, might have angered me. But on that day, I had a better response, a more godly response. I simply said, well, if she had known about all my other faults, she surely would not even have fooled around with that little old one. There are a whole lot bigger things she could have complained about. After all, it doesn't do much good to fuss or fight with a critic. I think it was James Truslow Adams who said, there is so much good in the worst of us and so much bad in the best of us that it ill behooves any of us to find fault with the rest of us. I want to live that way, avoiding speaking evil of others, instead speaking encouraging words, like Ephesians 4:29 tells us to do. Don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. So encourage whom? Everybody you have opportunity to. Question number 2, encourage when? Well, quite simply, encourage whenever you honestly can. Now, don't fake it. Nobody likes insincere compliments or insincere encouragement. Don't fake it, but encourage them when you can, at any time you possibly can. It's nothing worse than gushy, mushy, insincere flattery. But you can encourage most of the time if you're really looking for an opportunity to do so. I love the story about a preacher who was leaving a church, and at his farewell dinner, he decided to encourage the members, saying, "Now don't be so sad. The next preacher might actually be better than me." And one member spoke up and said, "That's what the last preacher said and the preacher before him said, and it just keeps getting worse." Well, they certainly weren't encouraging him very much, were they? But the power of encouragement is this. It's found in William Arthur Ward's words. "Flatter me, and I may not believe you. Criticize me, and I might not like you. Ignore me, and I may not forgive you. Encourage me, and I will not forget you. Love me, and I may be forced to love you." Oh, how true those words are, especially those last two sentences. You will not forget the people who encourage you, who make you feel good. You will not forget the people who love you. In fact, it will cause you to love them in return. Encourage when? Whenever you possibly can. Try to find some honest area to praise somebody else. Maybe you'll be like the woman who was trying to find some compliment for her miserable husband, and she brightened up finally after several minutes and said, "He breathes evenly." Well, look, today in these times with COVID-19, breathing evenly, that's a pretty good thing. I hope I'm able to do that, don't you? Breathing evenly. Even if that's the kind of thing you have to be thankful for, do it. I hope you can do a little better than that. At least move up to the level of my wife, who at a sweethearts banquet at our church a few years ago, when we were playing the newlywed game, except all of us were oldyweds, she was asked something good about me. And then when I came in and tried to guess it, I guessed several things, and I never got close to the right answer because she had said, "He's very clean." Well, okay, I would have probably preferred something a little better, but look, being very clean is a whole lot better than being very dirty, so I'll take it. Encourage publicly, openly, honestly. Remember, you'll always catch more flies with honey than you ever will with vinegar. And then that leads us to our third question, and that is, encourage how? We've already talked about encourage whom and encourage when. Well, encourage how? Well, let me tell you how. With no strings attached. Don't use praise to get favors. Don't use encouragement to get other people obligated to you. A few years ago, I had one person in our church who hardly ever spoke a word to me until they wanted something. And then they would come and praise a sermon or an article or something about me, and I was just waiting for, boom, what do they want? And sure enough, pretty well every time, I got some request. How should we praise and encourage? With sincere encouragement that is deserved and properly motivated. With sincere encouragement that seeks to help the other person out. With sincere encouragement that seeks to avoid grudges and anger and bitterness. That's how. That's how we should encourage others. And there's a fabulous true story about that from the end of the Civil War. After Robert E. Lee surrendered in the Civil War to the Union, President Abraham Lincoln spoke to a large crowd from the balcony of the White House, and he told them about the very considerate policy he had in mind for the South, for the Confederates. And at the end of his speech, Senator Harlan said, "Well, President, that's all fine and good, but what shall we do with the rebels?" and the vindictive crowd standing around the White House, somewhat reminding us of those who shouted about Jesus, "Crucify him, crucify him." The vindictive crowd shouted, "Hang them all." And then Tad Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's 11-year-old son, turned to his father and said, No, Papa, don't hang them. Hang on to them. Don't hang them. Hang on to them." And the crowd grew more silent, and President Lincoln said, "That's it. Tad has it. We must hang on to them. We must hang on to one another." There are too many people want to hang one another in our society and in our culture. And God's people have to be different. Christians have to be different. We have to want to hang on to one another. Encouragement is one of those rare twofold blessings. It blesses the life of the one you are encouraging. It brightens his or her day and lifts his or her spirit. It gives him new energy, new enthusiasm, new hope. It makes the discouraged want to try and try again. But it's also a blessing to the encourager, because you simply cannot scatter sunshine without getting a generous portion on yourself. You can't. Try it. You'll see. It will brighten your own outlook too. It will enable you to say, "This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it." When you encourage, the person being encouraged is uplifted, the Lord is glorified, and you are uplifted. And together as the body of Christ, we magnify God and edify one another. It is a true triple win when you encourage somebody else, like these scriptures we've looked at today tell us to do. They are blessed, you are blessed, God is glorified. Now look at that on the opposite end as well. When you discourage or unfairly criticize someone else, they are hurt, you are hurt, God is sad. This is an easy choice. What you can do during this period is encourage someone else. I'm going to give you some homework. I never do this in a Sunday preaching service. I'm going to give you some homework. I want you this week to specify at least one person that you are going to write a letter or send a card or send a text for the sole sake of encouraging them. That's what you can do. Even if you are stuck at home in a pandemic, still quarantined, you can do this. You can do this. Doesn't cost you anything but the cost of a stamp or a few punches on your thumbs. You can do this. Now here's what I know. I know that if you accept my challenge, and that if you encourage at least one person this week, that will feel so good that you'll do another one, and maybe even another one, or another one. And that encouragement will spread like the Southwest Florida sunshine. It truly will. And will be a blessing to somebody else, to you, and pleasing to God. True story, Dr. John Fawcett was the preacher of a small church in Wainsgate, England, and he had been beloved in that congregation where he had been for 7 years, but he was asked to come and serve in a larger church, one of the largest churches in England, in London, in 1782, and he accepted the job and had preached his farewell sermon, and the wagons were loaded with books and furniture, and they were ready for the departure when his parishioners gathered around him and with tears in their eyes begged him to stay. And his wife said, John, I cannot bear this. I just don't see how we can go. And John Fawcett said, neither can I. I think we will not go. Unload the wagon and put everything back as it was before. And the people rejoiced and held a special service of celebration. And he wrote the words to the hymn that has blessed us now for 240 years. Blessed be the tie that binds. A scene of encouragement led to the tie that binds us all together in love.